So fearful Donald Trump, the monster that we are all afraid of, is a, to mix a metaphor, paper tiger.
I'm Joanna Coles, Chief Content Officer of The Daily Beast, and you are listening to, watching, possibly ironing your clothes to, or walking your dog to The Daily Beast podcast. Regular viewers will recognize that I am not in my usual habitat. Instead, I'm staying at the Carlton Hotel in the south of France in Cannes for the Cannes Lion Creative Festival, which celebrates marketing, advertising, and creativity. So that's why I'm not in our usual studio, but I am fixed on all things America, not least, of course, Donald Trump's birthday parade. Who better to unpack it with than our regular guest, who many of you love, and incredible comments from our last podcast together, the man who lives in Donald Trump's head, Michael Wolff. Michael, let's waste no more time. Let's get into it. Okay, Michael, so much to discuss, as always.
And you're in Cannes.
I'm in Cannes.
Wish I were there.
No, you don't wish you were here.
I do. I have been many times, and it's, and it's the south of France.
It's the south of France.
Even with people you detest, which are most of the people who go to Cannes Lions, it is nevertheless still the south of France.
Of course, all anybody is talking about here is Donald Trump and the significance of Donald Trump. And I need to make a quick apology following all the comments we got from our last podcast, because I misidentified Senator Padilla. I called him, or Padilla as you call him, I called him Anthony instead of Alex. And actually, I didn't realize that he was the senior senator from California. For some reason, I thought Adam Schiff was, because Adam Schiff has been on the landscape for such a long time.
I mean, but they're both new.
Well, exactly. They're both new, relatively new in their senator roles. And is it Padilla or Padilla?
Technically, it's Padilla, but we're in America.
People seem to refer to him as Padilla. Anyway, Senator Padilla, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were the senior senator from California. And I also felt guilty, actually, to hyperbole about the state of chaos, as I was referring to it in California, which many people pointed out is just not true. It's a small area of LA that's in lockdown, which makes it even more egregious that Donald Trump has called in the National Guard over the head of Gavin Newsom, who we spoke to last week. Anyway, I wanted to address those comments because many of you wrote in, and you're perfectly right. So let's get that out of the way. And then we have another very nice comment about your bookshelf, which I'm going to come to right at the end of this podcast. But obviously, this weekend, it was the birthday parade, and I am unbelievably curious to find out what you thought of it, and then, as importantly, what the man whose birthday parade it was thought of it too, none other than our own President Donald Trump. What are you hearing? What are people saying?
It's really important to understand when we think about Donald Trump how much time he spends complaining. Nothing makes the man happy. And spending $45 million on a birthday celebration appears not to have made him happy either. He's kind of pissed off. He's pissed off at the soldiers. He's accusing them of hamming it up. And by that he seems to mean that they were having a good time, that they were waving, that they were enjoying themselves and showing a convivial face rather than a military face.
Interesting.
And he kind of reamed out Hegseth for this. Apparently there was a phone call and he said to Hegseth, the tone was all wrong. Why was the tone wrong? Who staged this? There was the tone problem. Trump, he keeps repeating himself. So that was the word on that phone call was tone. I would interpret that he wanted something menacing, I suppose, something military, like something like, this is the most staggering force in the world and maybe it will come for you, instead of I think it appeared to a lot of people that there was a kind of festive air. Everybody was actually celebrating something. The 250 years of the U.S. military, probably celebrating that more than Donald Trump's birthday. But it didn't send the message that he apparently wanted, which is that he was the commander-in-chief of this menacing enterprise.
Well, certainly having soldiers dressed up in costumes from 200 years ago would not send a menacing vibe to an enemy if they were looking at this. I thought it had the vibes of a sort of trade show for the army, that the plinth that they were sitting on, the sort of theatre that the VIPs were sitting on, that Donald Trump was sitting on with next to Hegseth and Melania. It looked like it had been put up overnight, and it literally looked like something from a trade show.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was not. None of this was sending the message that he seems to have wanted to send, which is that which was a threat. I think that's what he wanted. And he got the opposite of that. He got a kind of a Hamish gathering.
Right.
Which, by the way, no one went to. The other thing. So
Right.
So he's insisted, put it out. He said 250,000 people.
Yeah, Stephen Chang put that out.
Yeah, but that was from Trump. Put it out, 250,000. That is it, 250,000. He kept saying this, to everybody else, saying but 250,000. When in fact it was. I mean, the people I know there who were there said tops maybe 40,000, and probably more like 20,000.
You could see the empty bleachers. You could see as the drones pulled back, lots of empty lawn.
No. I mean, nobody was. I mean, who would go? I mean, it's hard to get anybody a draw to any parade. It's a parade.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, as a parent of two boys, when they were little, I could imagine having taken them to that because they would be intrigued by watching the men march by. I mean, the thing I found most striking, and I admit I come from a land where I'm not sure Britain could do very much militarily now, but we sure can put on a good parade. And so the one thing that you can see is all the soldiers marching in time. And the thing I found really striking was that lots of them, of the brigades in camo, literally weren't in step with each other.
I think we're very bad at parades. I think parades are like one of those old-fashioned entertainment things like circuses. I mean, the television has basically put those things out of business a long time ago.
But this was a producer, my understanding is that Pete Hegseth knew, who put the thing together. I mean, I don't know why Mark Burnett wasn't involved in putting something together that felt more professional. Yeah,
well, it's not even the professional thing that I think is most interesting, that somehow they didn't get the memo from Trump that he wanted threat and menace. And they got the opposite of that. Nice. They got nice. The military is a nice military, friendly.
We're going to throw sweets into the crowd, which is, of course, what they do. And do you think that was a deliberate misinterpretation of his message? Was this actually quite a smart, subversive take on his message, or do you think it was just accidental, but they really didn't understand?
No, I think it probably was subversive, or better heads prevailed on this as a branding exercise. I mean, Trump's thing, I think, is to think of the military like we thought of it in the 1950s and 60s, when Russia was the enemy and it was a Cold War enterprise, and it was sort of Dr. Strange-Lovian, and and we were always, the guys in the military were always ready to bomb someone back into the Stone Age. And it was a threatening force then, which I think was was very difficult, and many politicians found it very difficult to contain. But the military has changed radically since then. I mean, it's now a sort of, very PR aware, HR aware kind of, they bring in McKinsey consultants all the time. I mean, it's a much more corporate, I mean, for better or worse, corporate, image conscious, and DEI, basically, complex organization. And I think that's what we saw out there yesterday. And that's not what Trump wanted to see. I don't think he understands that's what the military has become. Although, in every situation in which he's faced with the military, the top brass, he's always complaining about it. They're always pulling out PowerPoints to show him, and he's always leaving the room because he can't watch a PowerPoint.
Right. Well, and you think, obviously the future of military is much more technical. It's much more cyber. It's relying on drones. I mean, it was hard not to listen to that tank creaking in the silence down the street because nobody was cheering, that it was like watching fax machines roll by in the age of the iPhone.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it is. I mean, he is, again, Trump is located somewhere in the past. I've often put it as 1965. All of his references. And I think this, again, he expected to see that kind of military. Instead, he got the modern military, a complex organization with all kinds of constituencies, very aware of how it is perceived, of how it wants to be perceived.
Yeah, well, I loved the robot dog, but what I was struck by was watching the parade, and he looked bored. I mean, this is a long time for Donald Trump to sit still, other than when he was jumping up and saluting. Melania looked bored. Marco Rubio was yawning, and Pete Hegseth just looked extremely anxious to be sitting there next to the president in charge of this parade.
Well, again, it's parades. Americans don't watch parades. Parades are actually boring. They're repetitive. They go on forever and ever. There really is no narrative. It's all old-fashioned.
There's no narrative. It reminds me, actually, of, I think, the second time Obama's second inauguration, he had to sit there watching all these little bands from small-town America, and he was wildly chewing gum to keep himself, I think, sort of focused. But one was also struck that they're sitting there watching this parade, as you say, with no narrative whatsoever, while the narrative playing out in the Middle East is Israel and Iran going at it, and actual warfare going on while Trump is cosplaying, being commander-in-chief.
It goes further than that. This war is taking place, and we are irrelevant to it. We were not even if Trump is rushing forward to kind of try to claim some kind of influence in this thing, he had no influence. And in fact, it was basically against him. Basically, he got played. They used him. The Israelis appear to have used him as cover. He's carrying on a negotiation which was seeming to go nowhere, and the theory was that Israel would not attack until after that gambit was played out, and of course they did attack, shocking no one so much as Donald Trump.
Oh my goodness! So he's now, it feels like, trying to muscle himself into relevancy by claiming that he stopped them from assassinating Iran's leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. Is that likely to be true, do we think?
No, I think it's completely not. And I think they will, if they can, they will assassinate him.
So what is Donald Trump now doing? He's gone to the G7. We're recording this on a Monday. It will air on a Tuesday. What are his advisors, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State's advisors, doing at this moment?
Well, let's use the word advisors loosely around Donald Trump, because A, he doesn't take advice, and B, the people who are there to theoretically offer advice are kind of dummies themselves. They have no advice really to offer.
And this would be his golf buddy who we talked about in the last podcast, Steve Witkoff. Supposedly the special envoy to the Middle East.
Yes, I mean, I think there are other people hovering around there too, trying to get close. They all kind of form a little scrum around Donald Trump, because proximity, literally, you can measure it in inches, is the currency there. But I think what the world is seeing, and you can see a transformation that has gone on here in the first early months of this new administration. The world seemed kind of stricken. What was he going to do? What moves was he going to make? What ways would he destabilize the world order? And I think now people are starting to say, well, he can't do it because he's not going to do anything because he knows nothing. I mean, it's very hard to make moves in a complex situation when you don't have the details, the facts. You don't really have command of what's going on the ground. And I think more and more this becomes the critique, a potent critique and an accurate critique of the Trump administration. They're completely incompetent. They just know nothing. They bring no facility to think things through, to make a plan, to have a strategy. So the tariffs, he can proclaim tariffs without evidently realizing that would have a profound effect on the world's economy, a negative effect, which would come back and bite him in the ass. So therefore, okay, yes, so take those tariffs today, no tariffs tomorrow. Now we're just dealing with the same thing on this order of this plan of mass deportations. He appears not to have been aware that this would overwhelmingly include people in the agricultural sector, in hotels and restaurants, all of which he are a substantial part of his coalition and a substantial part of the U.S. economy. And he figured this out apparently yesterday.
Rollins, the agriculture minister, is supposed to have called him and said, you need to stop the ICE raids on farms because 60% of laborers are not turning up. Fruit is going unpicked and rotting in the fields. And so he then announced that he was sort of putting a halt on farm workers, hotel workers and restaurant workers. And clearly, I'm sure some of his donors who own hotels and own restaurants were saying, what are you doing? And he must know too, as someone that's run construction, that's run restaurants and hotels, that immigrants make up a large part of the tax-paying workforce.
Well, he clearly did not know that, or he clearly did not think that through. So, which is even more disturbing. So, even stuff that he knows or should know, he doesn't appear to know.
It's as if he's making his sort of statements out here, and there's no connection to real life whatsoever. Again, which goes back to what you're always saying. He's playing a president on television. This is a television show with no actual consequences in real life.
And this is so it's very important and very interesting to get to that point where I think lots of people are starting to realize this. So fearful Donald Trump, this monster that we are all afraid of, is to mix a metaphor, paper tiger.
Right.
There is no follow through because there can't be a follow through. If you don't have a plan other than the announcement of a plan,
right,
you're kind of screwed. I mean, what are you going to do when the plan kicks in and it starts to backfire on you, which all of these things do. And by the way, that has also happened clearly in a full range of his foreign policy actions. Nothing happens.
So we have Ken Griffin, big supporter of Donald Trump, saying at the time of the tariffs, America has lost 20% of its value, which seems an astonishing legacy for Trump. So he's now redirected ICE into the Democratic cities, he says, partly punitive because, of course, we haven't even spoken about the King's protests. And I know you went on your own protests with your children in East Hampton, which I want to come to next. And now we're hearing that ICE is actually running out of cash, that they can't just keep on supporting these sort of mass roundups of people. So will this stop inevitably too?
Yes, another instance of not thinking through this. Oh, we're going to do this and it costs a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, yeah, all of this, the idea of mass deportations is just a thing. I mean, it's like, building a wall.
Right.
Which we haven't done and we are not going to do. It is a very complex, expensive, complex undertaking with a lot of cause and effect that you have to think through because it's going to impact so many other things that are vital to people. And there was a piece, and I should remember where, and I don't remember. Basically saying that a great many people in the country approved of the things that Donald Trump says he wants to do, but a great many people, even more, were troubled by his methods. I mean, so you have this major clash. This is kind of reality and illusion. He creates the illusion. The reality is something that A doesn't work, that people don't like, and that C has to be reversed.
Right. So why does this leave Stephen Miller in all this? Because Stephen Miller is sort of saying we need to deport 3,000 people an hour. He's laying down quotas. He's the one that was supposed to be saying, in Trump 1, we didn't really know what was happening. We didn't know how to get ready for it. We didn't know the system. We've come back. We know the system. Now we're going to get things done. And Stephen Miller appears to be the engine behind the ICE strategy.
It's one of the things that happens, and we've talked about this before. Trump, who is lazy, lets other people be in charge until they are perceived as being in charge, and then they are no longer in charge.
So Stephen Miller is making a mess of this, and he will at some point fall foul of Trump and be dispatched. A bit like Elon at Doge.
Yes, and also that happened in the first administration. Remember in the early days of Trump 1, there were, the Muslim bans and,
yep.
And there were pandemonium at the airport. That was Stephen Miller. And that had to be reversed. That was Bannon, too, Bannon and Miller. And that was immediately, shortly thereafter, reversed. You remember that the instance of babies being snatched from their mother's arms. Again, Stephen Miller. And that caused one person in the inner circle who I know to describe this as Stephen's masturbatory fantasies of of immigration and deportation. So there is an awareness that Stephen Miller is a problem. And even Trump calls him Weird Stephen.
Weird Stephen.
Because he is weird, by the way. I mean,
right.
You can't spend a moment with him and not saying, oh, something off here.
And what is that to do with? What, he doesn't keep eye contact? He looks very grey, but that's not enough to say he's weird. What constitutes the weirdness other than wanting to deport every immigrant?
Yeah, he doesn't make eye contact, and then he talks to you in this monotone voice, and it feels very revvy. You know, the engine keeps. The engine of his voice keeps going, and you kind of step back.
Okay, well, that's definitely not a sell for Stephen Miller. But so watch this space on Stephen Miller as ICE all starts as everything about ICE and the raids now annoys a lot of Republicans who have supported Trump up until now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he has to, and even when when the administration began, and another person close to Trump who I said, okay, what's going to happen here with this? And this person was very straightforward. Well, they'll try to deport everybody until the headlines get too bad, and then we'll move on to something else.
So where are Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson now in terms of Trump's, which one does Trump currently favor? I know Steve Bannon is out to the left, but he's frantically trying to get in again to fill the gap that Elon has left. And then you've got Tucker Carlson talking about the war.
That's the crisis, I think, that's going to occur basically this week. Trump has to decide. I mean, there is already enormous pressure around Trump for the U.S. to give Israel its deep penetration bunker bombs, and a lot of support for that in the Republican leadership. A lot of support to go in behind Israel in this death battle, it seems, with Iran. But that.
And hold on, the bunker bombs are the bombs that are supposed to take out the military sites, the nuclear sites that are buried deep within the hills.
Exactly. And only that we have. Israel doesn't have that capability, apparently. So that is, but this is deeply, deeply, deeply opposed by the core MAGA faction, which would, I think is most publicly represented by Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson.
And they don't want any military involvement, or they don't want us to give the bombs, or they don't.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think they want nothing. This is, they are classic isolationists. And they're the America first, and then Trump came out and said this was, another Trumpian thing. Well, how do they know what American first is? Because I made up the term.
Right. I saw that in The Atlantic, right? That if I made up America first, so I must know what America first means. I define it. I get to define it.
Yes. And just to obviously make the point, he did not make up America first. That America first was a very potent right-wing conservative movement before the Second World War.
Right, but he won't know that, of course. So MAGA doesn't want any involvement. Do we have any sense of? And again, I can hardly believe I'm asking this question, of what Trump actually thinks would be the right thing to do here?
I mean, he thought the right thing to do right up until this invasion began. He thought he would be able to squeeze the Iranians for a deal, and then everybody would say, "Oh, he got a deal." I mean, this is the thing. I mean, which he is essentially promising around the world. I'm going to solve all the problems because I'm going to make a deal. He has yet to make a deal.
Right. And all the deals he promised, none of which have come true. And does he have a sense of this? Is he feeling humiliated at all by, obviously he promised he could solve the Ukraine and Russia within a day. He said, within 24 hours, I could get that done. Does he have any sense whatsoever of his empty bragging and boasting?
Are you really asking this question? If he did have that sense, he would not be Donald Trump. So the secret of being Donald Trump is to have no self-awareness, and B, always to assume it is someone else's fault. Always, 100% of the time. He will always blame somebody else. He will never accept blame, never accept fault, never accept failure.
All right, so we've got a big week ahead of us, which obviously we will be coming back to you to discuss. I want to read a comment that someone left, which I thought was very well observed. This is by someone called Adventure Halley 8366. I love when you have Michael on, but I'm always so troubled by his bookcase. Norman Mailer in 5 different locations. And actually, as you're sitting there, I can see a Norman Mailer right behind you. Norman Mailer in 5 different locations, like sprinkles on a cake. Bernard Malamute in 3 different locations, a lovely edition of 100 Years of Solitude. It's obvious Michael is a voracious reader. I wish you would do a video just on that alone.
Well, I would. One of the problems with maintaining a library is keeping books in place. So they get scattered. They did begin, and at various points they are actually alphabetized correctly. But
you add new editions, new versions, new books, and then it's all thing. But if people, you and Victoria, your wife, have sort of launched a new Instagram page, which I feel we should just at least mention for people who are intrigued by the different backgrounds that we interview you in your lovely house in the Hamptons. What it's called?
My wife Victoria, who does when I do this Instagram account, and she does she does basically everything.
The set dressing. She does the set dressing.
I just step in and do my say my piece. But people seem actually perhaps even more interested in the settings in the background than they do in what I have to say about Donald Trump. So she's just started her own Instagram focused on the house and the garden called Our Amagansett Home or House. Our Amagansett Home, I think it is.
Well, you can find it on Michael Wolff NYC at Instagram because there's a sort of cross connection to it. But I wanted to call it out because I think people are intrigued by your bookshelf. And at some point, we should do a podcast exclusively on your books, which ones mean the most to you, which ones you like, which editions, all of that. But perhaps that's for another day. In the meantime, I'm obsessed by what you intuit over what's happening with Donald Trump, and also what people tell you. And we're looking to a complicated week.
Well, all weeks, of course, all Donald Trump weeks are complicated weeks. And in part because of this Trumpian thing of everything changes. Everything changes on a dime. Because how do you deal with the fact that this didn't work out? Well, you just do launch something else that's not going to work out.
Yep. I mean, no one's talking about Doge anymore. Gavin Newsom had his moment, but now it looks like, well, the National Guard is still in that tiny quarter of downtown LA, correct?
As far as I understand, but you move on.
Right.
This is in a way the secret of Trump's survival.
Right. The narrative just rolls on to something else. All right, Michael, great to talk to you as always. And if you have a comment on what Michael said here, please feel free to leave it on YouTube. We love to read them. And you were right, I got Alex Padilla's first name wrong. He's not called Anthony, but we've corrected it. That's the point of the comments. Michael, we will talk to you very soon.
See ya.
I totally forgot to ask Michael about his taking his little children to a protest in East Hampton, of all places. We'll do that on the next podcast. Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to subscribe to the Daily Beast podcast and the Daily Beast itself for updates of what's going on. We are independent media. We love your support and we love your comments. I try and read as many of them as I possibly can, and I answer as many as I can too. But we love hearing from you. And don't forget, the times call for it. Be beast. This podcast was produced by Devon Rogerino and Anna von Ursen, and it was edited by Jesse Millward.